The Great Spirit, a concept echoing through indigenous cultures worldwide, is often misunderstood. It's not just a distant deity, but a vibrant, interconnected force shaping our reality. This film unravels the common myths surrounding this powerful idea, revealing its profound relevance to our lives today. Prepare to see the world, and your place in it, with fresh eyes. The monolithic Great Spirit concept. The idea of a single, all-encompassing Great Spirit is often presented as a universal truth across all indigenous North American cultures. This monolithic view simplifies diverse spiritual beliefs into a neat, easily digestible package. However, this concept, as it's commonly understood, is largely a European interpretation, a way for outsiders to categorize and comprehend spiritual practices that were, and are, incredibly varied. Many indigenous nations had, and continue to have, their own distinct names, attributes, and understandings of the Creator or the Great Mystery, which don't neatly fit into one singular definition. For instance, the Anishinaabe people speak of Gishimanadu, the Lakota have Wakantanka, and the Haudenosaunee refer to the Creator. While these might share commonalities in acknowledging a supreme being or force, the specifics of their relationship with humanity, their perceived form, and their role in the cosmos differ significantly. It's akin to how different cultures might have a word for love, but the nuances of expressing and experiencing love can vary widely from one society to another. This oversimplification can lead to a misunderstanding of the rich tapestry of indigenous spirituality. When the Great Spirit is presented as a singular, static entity, it risks erasing the unique cosmologies and traditions of individual nations. It implies a uniformity that doesn't exist, much like assuming all European countries share the exact same religious practices just because many are predominantly Christian. The focus on a singular Great Spirit often overlooks the complex pantheons, the importance of nature spirits, the role of ancestors, and the intricate ceremonies that form the core of many indigenous spiritual lives. These elements are not just secondary to a creator figure. They are integral parts of a holistic spiritual worldview. Furthermore, the adoption of the Great Spirit concept by some missionaries and early ethnographers served to make indigenous beliefs more palatable to European sensibilities, often by drawing parallels to monotheistic religions. This process, while perhaps well-intentioned in some cases, inevitably reshaped how these beliefs were perceived and documented. It's like trying to describe a complex flavor profile using only a few basic taste adjectives. Something essential is lost in translation. The reality is that indigenous spiritual systems are dynamic, deeply connected to specific lands, histories, and languages, and cannot be reduced to a single, universally applied term without losing their profound depth and diversity. Indigenous spirituality is not monolithic. The Great Spirit, often misunderstood as a singular, universally recognized deity across all indigenous cultures, is in reality a concept that varies greatly. Many indigenous peoples hold diverse beliefs about the nature of the Creator or the Great Spirit. Some traditions may not use the term Great Spirit at all, instead referring to a multitude of spirits, forces, or a more generalized life force that permeates all things. For example, in some Plains cultures, the term Wakantanka is used, which can be translated as Great Spirit, but it also encompasses a complex system of numerous sacred powers and beings. This is not a simple hierarchy with one supreme being at the top, but rather an interconnected web of spiritual energy. This diversity extends to how the spiritual world is understood and interacted with. Not all indigenous spiritual practices are centered around a single, anthropomorphic Great Spirit. Some traditions focus on the spirits of nature, the wind, the water, the animals, the plants, as distinct yet interconnected entities. These spirits are not seen as separate from the physical world, but as integral parts of it. For instance, a community might have specific ceremonies dedicated to the spirit of the bear for strength or the spirit of the eagle for vision, and these are not necessarily subordinate to a single, overarching Great Spirit. They are respected and honored in their own right, reflecting a worldview where the sacred is immanent in the everyday. Furthermore, the very idea of a spirituality as a distinct category separate from daily life, is often a Western imposition. For many indigenous peoples, their spiritual beliefs are not confined to rituals or ceremonies, but are woven into the fabric of their existence, influencing everything from how they hunt and farm to how they govern and raise their children. The concept of a great spirit, when it exists, might be understood not as a distant ruler, but as an intimate presence, a guiding force that is felt in the community, the land, and within each individual. This immanent quality means that the expression of spiritual beliefs can be as varied as the landscapes and lifeways of the indigenous nations themselves. The Great Spirit, as a colonial imposition. The concept of a singular, all-powerful Great Spirit as the supreme deity among indigenous peoples of North America is largely a construct that emerged from interactions with European colonists, missionaries and traders, seeking to understand and convert native populations, often projected their own monotheistic beliefs onto diverse indigenous spiritual systems. They interpreted various creator figures, nature spirits, or tribal deities through the lens of their own religious framework, simplifying complex cosmologies into a single, understandable entity. This process, known as syncretism, led to a generalized image of the Great Spirit that smoothed over the rich variety of beliefs and practices found across different nations. This imposed monotheistic view often ignored or downplayed the intricate relationships indigenous peoples had with the natural world, which were seen as imbued with spirit and agency. For instance, a local tribe might have specific ceremonies honoring the spirit of a river, the wisdom of an ancient tree, or the power of a particular animal. Colonizers, however, tended to categorize these as lesser spirits or superstitions, subservient to a distant, overarching Great Spirit. This effectively devalued indigenous spiritual practices and paved the way for their suppression, framing them as primitive in contrast to the supposedly more sophisticated European model. A Lakota elder might speak of Wakantanka, a concept that encompasses not just a creator, but also the sacredness of all things, including the earth, sky, and all living beings. European interpretations, however, often reduced this to a singular, anthropomorphic deity. The simplification of indigenous spirituality into a singular, Great Spirit also served colonial interests by making conversion easier. By presenting a concept that vaguely resembled their own god, missionaries could more readily persuade indigenous people to abandon their traditional ways. This often involved a deliberate misunderstanding or misrepresentation of indigenous beliefs, framing them as incomplete or erroneous until corrected by Christian doctrine. The Great Spirit became a convenient label, a bridgehead for imposing a foreign religious system. It allowed colonists to claim they were merely completing or refining existing spiritual beliefs, rather than attempting a wholesale replacement. This narrative helped legitimize colonization in the eyes of Europeans, portraying it as a civilizing mission rather than an act of cultural destruction. Furthermore, the widespread adoption of the Great Spirit narrative in popular culture, and even in some academic circles, has perpetuated this colonial simplification. It has become a generalized symbol, often used without acknowledging its complex origins or the diversity of indigenous spiritual traditions it overshadows. This can lead to a superficial understanding of indigenous worldviews, where the intricate web of relationships between humans, the environment, and the sacred is flattened into a singular, easily digestible concept. For example, in some New Age interpretations, the Great Spirit is invoked as a universal divine force, detached from the specific cultural contexts and responsibilities inherent in indigenous spiritual practices. Misinterpretations of animism and polytheism. One common misunderstanding is equating the concept of the Great Spirit with a single, all-powerful deity in the Abrahamic sense. Many indigenous cultures, however, view the Great Spirit not as a singular anthropomorphic being, but as the fundamental life force or the sacred essence that permeates all of creation. This essence is not separate from the world, but is intrinsically woven into every rock, river, animal, and plant. Think of it like the electricity that powers everything in your home. It's not a distinct object, but the energy that makes everything work. This perspective is often mislabeled as animism, which is then incorrectly simplified to mean that indigenous peoples worship rocks and trees as individual gods. Animism, in its true sense, acknowledges that all things possess a spirit or consciousness. It's a recognition of the interconnectedness of life, where humans are not masters of nature but part of a larger, sacred web. For instance, when a hunter takes an animal's life, there's often a ritual of gratitude and apology offered to the animal's spirit, acknowledging the sacrifice and the continuation of the life cycle. This isn't worship of the animal as a god, but respect for its spirit and its role in the ecosystem. This holistic view is fundamentally different from the Western idea of a distant, supreme creator who dictates laws from above. The idea of polytheism, the belief in multiple gods, is also frequently misapplied. While some indigenous traditions might recognize various spirits or forces that embody different aspects of nature, like the spirit of the wind or the spirit of the earth, these are not typically seen as independent deities vying for power or adoration. Instead, they are often understood as manifestations or expressions of the greater, unifying spirit. It's more akin to understanding that the different functions in your body, breathing, digestion, thinking, are all part of your single, unified self, rather than separate entities. These spirits are part of the Great Spirit, not separate gods in a pantheon. These misinterpretations often stem from attempts to fit indigenous spiritual beliefs into familiar Western frameworks. The concepts of a singular, personal God and a pantheon of gods are deeply ingrained in Western religious thought. When encountering indigenous spirituality, there's a tendency to categorize it using these existing labels, leading to oversimplification and a loss of the nuanced understanding of interconnectedness and immanence that characterizes many indigenous worldviews. The Great Spirit represents a profound spiritual unity, a concept that transcends simple classifications of animism or polytheism. The role of oral traditions and storytelling. The Great Spirit, often conceptualized as the supreme creator and sustainer of the universe in many indigenous North American belief systems, is deeply intertwined with the power of oral traditions and storytelling. These narratives are not mere entertainment. They are living libraries, repositories of wisdom, history, and spiritual understanding passed down through generations. Elders and knowledge keepers are the custodians of these stories, and their role is sacred. They carefully recount the myths, legends, and teachings, ensuring accuracy and preserving the nuances of meaning. This oral transmission allows for a dynamic and living connection to the past, where the stories can be adapted and interpreted within contemporary contexts, while still holding their core truths. Storytelling acts as a vital educational tool, shaping the moral and ethical framework of communities. Through allegorical tales and character-driven narratives, younger generations learn about the Great Spirit's attributes, the interconnectedness of all life, and the proper way to live in harmony with the natural world. For instance, a story might illustrate the consequences of greed through the tale of a creature who hoards all the sunlight, plunging the world into darkness, thereby teaching the importance of sharing and balance. Such stories embed complex spiritual and ecological concepts in memorable and accessible ways, making them understandable and relatable. This method of teaching fosters a deep respect for the spiritual forces governing existence and promotes a sense of collective responsibility. Furthermore, oral traditions provide a sense of identity and belonging. The stories of the Great Spirit and the creation of the world are often unique to specific nations or tribes, reflecting their particular relationship with the land and the spiritual realm. Recounting these ancestral narratives reinforces cultural distinctiveness and strengthens community bonds. When an elder shares a story around a fire, it's a communal act that reaffirms shared values and history. This act of listening and remembering connects individuals to their ancestors and to the ongoing story of their people. The Great Spirit, in this context, is not a distant deity but an active presence, understood and experienced through the shared cultural memory preserved in these sacred oral traditions. Sacredness in nature versus anthropomorphism. The concept of the Great Spirit often emphasizes the sacredness inherent in nature rather than portraying a human-like deity. Many indigenous cultures view the Great Spirit not as a being with a physical